There's a phrase I need you to understand before we begin today. Christian nationalism. You've probably heard it. Maybe you've dismissed it as political hyperbole. Maybe you've thought, that's not really a thing. Maybe you've been told it's just people trying to bring morality back to America. But here's what I need you to hear today. Christian nationalism is not about faith. It's not about spirituality, and it is absolutely not about following Jesus. It's a political ideology wrapped in religious language. It's a power structure dressed up as devotion. Christian nationalists are dangerous, not just to non-Christians, but to democracy itself. And yes, I said nationalists, not nationalism, on purpose, because this isn't just an abstract idea floating around in books or sermons. This is people. This is movements. This is legislation. This is school boards and courtrooms and state houses. This is real-world harm happening right now to real people. So if what I'm about to say makes you uncomfortable, good. It should. Welcome to Gravel and Ink, the podcast where we dig into the messy, complicated truths that shape our world. Today we're talking about something that doesn't get discussed honestly enough: Christian nationalism. Not Christianity, not people of faith, not the millions of Christians in this country who are kind, thoughtful, and believe deeply in the separation of church and state. We're talking about Christian nationalism, a political ideology that uses Christianity as a weapon to control, dominate, and exclude. Now, before anyone closes their podcast app or fires off an angry email, let me be crystal clear about what this episode is and what it isn't. This is not an attack on Christianity. I'm not here to mock faith or dismiss the very real good that religion brings to millions of people's lives. Faith communities feed the hungry, shelter the homeless, comfort the grieving. They build hospitals and schools. They inspire art, music, and profound acts of human kindness. That's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about the people who hijack that faith, who twist those teachings, who use the language of religion to justify the exact opposite of what Jesus actually taught. And we need to talk about it honestly, because silence helps extremists, confusion helps extremists, and pretending this isn't happening helps extremists most of all. So let's start with the definition. Christian nationalism is the belief that the United States was founded as a Christian nation for Christian people and should be governed according to a specific interpretation of Christian values, usually a very particular, white, conservative, evangelical version of Christianity. It says if you're not Christian, you don't fully belong here. It says if you are Christian, but the wrong kind, Catholic, mainline Protestant, Black church tradition, progressive, queer affirming, you don't count. It says if you're Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, atheist, agnostic, or simply someone who believes in the separation of church and state, you're a problem to be managed or eliminated. This isn't about freedom of religion. It's about religious supremacy. It's about one group saying, our God, our rules, our country. And if you disagree, you're not just wrong, you're godless, you're immoral, you're un-American. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but what does this actually look like? How do I recognize it? Great question. Let me paint you a picture. Christian nationalism shows up when a school board bans books about LGBTQ plus families, not because they're inappropriate, but because they conflict with Christian values. A state legislature passes a law forcing public schools to display the Ten Commandments, not as historical document, but as religious instruction. A pastor tells their congregation that voting for a particular party is a Christian duty, and that voting differently is sin. A group lobbies to restrict healthcare access based on religious doctrine, not just for themselves, but for everyone, regardless of their beliefs. These aren't hypotheticals. These are things happening right now in communities across this country. And the common thread? The belief that one religious worldview should have the power to control everyone else's life. Here's something crucial to understand. Christian nationalism did not start with Donald Trump. It didn't start with rallies or January 6th, or even the Tea Party movement. Christian nationalism has deep, deep roots in American history, and understanding those roots matters. Christian nationalism was there when colonizers used the doctrine of discovery, a papal decree, to claim indigenous lands as their God-given right. It was there during slavery, when white Christians built entire theological frameworks to justify treating human beings as property. They literally preached that slavery was ordained by God. They used scripture to defend it. They claimed it was their divine duty. It was there during Manifest Destiny, when the genocide of indigenous peoples was framed as America's sacred mission. From sea to shining sea wasn't just geography, it was theology. It was there during Reconstruction and Jim Crow, when white churches blessed segregation and called it God's natural order. It was there when white Christian groups violently opposed civil rights, claiming that integration violated biblical teaching. It was there when the Equal Rights Amendment failed, when women demanding equality were told they were defying God's design. It is still there, and actually still is, in every single campaign to deny LGBTQ+ people basic human rights and dignity. This ideology has always been here, lurking in the shadows of American power. What's different now is that it's no longer hiding. Christian nationalists are no longer using dog whistles, they're using megaphones. They're writing legislation that explicitly cites religious justification. They're running for school boards with the express purpose of inserting Christian doctrine. They're sitting on the Supreme Court and state courts, making decisions that chip away at the wall between church and state. They're speaking at rallies and conferences saying things like, "We need to reclaim America for Christ," and "This is a Christian nation and we need to act like it." They're telling us exactly who they are, and we need to believe them. I want to pause here and say something important. Christian nationalism is not Christianity. Let me say that again louder for the people in the back. Christian nationalism is not Christianity. You can be a devout Christian and oppose Christian nationalism. Many Christians do. In fact, some of the strongest voices against Christian nationalism come from people of deep, sincere faith, because they recognize something fundamental. Christian nationalism takes the name of Christ and uses it to justify the exact opposite of what Jesus actually taught. So if Christian nationalism isn't following Jesus, what is it following? Power, hierarchy, patriarchy, control, dominance. Christian nationalism rejects humility and demands authority. It rejects compassion and demands conformity. It rejects the stranger, the immigrant, the outsider, the very people Jesus told us to welcome. Christian nationalism doesn't worship God. It worships nationalism, and then it slaps a cross on it and calls it holy. So why does this matter? Why am I spending an entire episode on this? Because Christian nationalism is fundamentally incompatible with democracy. Let me explain why. Democracy requires pluralism. It requires the fundamental belief that people with different views, different backgrounds, different beliefs can share space and power. It requires compromise, negotiation, the understanding that no one group has a monopoly on truth or righteousness. But Christian nationalism says, we are chosen to rule. God does endorse our politics. Anyone who disagrees is evil or, at best, deeply misguided. When you believe God is on your side, exclusively, undeniably, absolutely on your side, compromise becomes betrayal, negotiation becomes weakness, and people who disagree aren't just wrong, they're enemies of God. And that belief justifies anything. And I'm not speaking theoretically. We can see the harm Christian nationalism causes right now. It strips bodily autonomy, especially for women and pregnant people, based on religious doctrine, not medical science. It criminalizes healthcare. People are literally being denied life-saving medical care because of someone else's religious beliefs. It bans books, not because they're harmful, but because they challenge a particular religious worldview. It silences educators who try to teach accurate history, including the history of racism, colonialism, and yes, Christian nationalism. It targets LGBTQ plus people for simply existing. It denies them healthcare, education, employment protections, and basic dignity. It undermines elections because when you believe God ordains certain leaders, you don't accept democratic outcomes that contradict that belief. And yes, it excuses political violence because if you're fighting for God, any means become justified. And this isn't speculation. This is happening right now in your state, maybe in your city. Here's the scariest part. When people believe they're acting on behalf of God, violence stops being violence. It becomes defense. It becomes duty. It becomes holy. We've seen this throughout history. We saw it in the Crusades. We saw it in the Inquisition. We saw it in the witch trials. We saw it in countless religious wars. We saw it on January 6th, 2021, when insurrectionists carried crosses and Christian flags into the Capitol while committing acts of violence. Some of them literally prayed before attacking police officers. That's what happens when political violence gets baptized in religious language. It becomes righteous in the minds of the people committing it. Okay, so you might be thinking, but wait, isn't America a Christian nation? Weren't the founders Christian? Doesn't it say, "In God we trust" on our money? These are fair questions, and they deserve clear answers. So let's talk about American history, the real history, not the sanitized, mythologized version. First, many of the founders were not traditional Christians. They were deists. They believed in a creator God, but not in the divinity of Jesus or the authority of the Bible. Thomas Jefferson literally created his own version of the Bible, cutting out all the miracles and supernatural elements because he didn't believe in them. Thomas Paine, who wrote the pamphlet that basically sparked the revolution, said, "My own mind is my own church." Benjamin Franklin attended multiple different churches and didn't commit to any particular doctrine. These men weren't trying to build a Christian theocracy, they were trying to escape one. The Constitution, the actual founding document of our nation, mentions God exactly 0 times. 0. It mentions Jesus 0 times. It mentions Christianity 0 times. You know what it does say? Article 6. No religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. The founders explicitly, intentionally separated church and state, and they did it for a reason. The founders understood something that Christian nationalists refuse to accept. When religion and government merge, both become corrupt. Religion becomes a tool for political power instead of spiritual growth. And government becomes tyrannical because it claims divine authority that can't be questioned. The separation of church and state isn't an attack on religion. It's a protection for it. And it's a protection for everyone, including Christians. Because if the government can enforce one version of Christianity, it can enforce any version, or no version, or a different religion entirely. Religious freedom means the government stays out of your faith. All of our faiths. That's the deal. Oh, and about "In God We Trust" on our money, that was added in 1956 during the Cold War as a way to differentiate America from godless communism. It wasn't there at the founding. It was Cold War propaganda. The original motto of the United States was "A pluribus unum," out of many, one. That's what America was supposed to be about, unity in diversity, not religious conformity. Now, if you've been paying attention to this issue, you've probably experienced something frustrating. You point out Christian nationalism and someone tells you you're overreacting. You share documentation of Christian nationalist rhetoric and someone says that's not what they really mean. You express concern about religious extremism influencing policy and someone accuses you of being anti-Christian. This is gaslighting, and it's deliberate. Step 1, Say the quiet part out loud. Write books, give speeches, publish manifestos about Christian dominion and godly government. Step 2, when people point it out, claim they're misunderstanding or being hysterical. Step 3, frame any criticism as religious persecution. They just hate Christians. Step 4, continue doing exactly what you said you were going to do while people are still arguing about whether you really meant it. It's manipulation, pure and simple. But here's the thing. We don't have to guess what Christian nationalists want. They've told us. They've published manifestos. They've outlined policy roadmaps. They've explained their court strategies. They've detailed their plans for educational takeover. Organizations like the Family Research Council, the Alliance Defending Freedom, and Turning Point USA have explicitly Christian nationalist agendas that they don't hide. The Seven Mountain Mandate, a literal plan to take dominion over 7 areas of society, including government, education, and media, is openly taught in churches. Project 2025, a nearly 1,000-page policy blueprint, is full of Christian nationalist priorities. This is not paranoia. This is not conspiracy theory. This is documentation. When people tell you who they are, believe them. So, what does all of this mean for you? Maybe you're Christian, maybe you're not. Maybe you're somewhere in between. Wherever you are spiritually, this matters to you. Because Christian nationalism doesn't just affect people who aren't Christian, it affects everyone. If you're Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, atheist, agnostic, spiritual but not religious, Christian nationalism sees you as a problem. It wants to make you a second-class citizen in your own country. It wants your children educated in Christian doctrine whether you consent or not. It wants your healthcare decisions made according to Christian theology, not medical science. It wants you to sit down, shut up, and accept Christian dominance over public life. You have every right to oppose that. That's not bigotry. That's self-defense. If you are Christian, and especially if you're a Christian who believes in justice, compassion, and the separation of church and state, you need to speak up. Because Christian nationalism is hijacking your faith. It's using the name of Jesus to justify things Jesus would have condemned. And when Christians stay silent, it gives Christian nationalists cover. It allows them to claim they speak for all Christians, for all of Christianity. They don't. But their voices are the loudest right now, and that needs to change. Christian nationalism thrives in silence. It thrives when we're too polite to name it. It thrives when we're too confused to recognize it. It thrives when we minimize it, dismiss it, or pretend it's not as bad as it looks. But naming the threat isn't intolerance. It's responsibility. You don't have to hate Christianity to oppose Christian nationalism. You just have to care about democracy, human rights, religious freedom for everyone, truth, your neighbors, all of your neighbors, even the ones who are different from you. So, where does this leave us? I'm not going to lie to you. This is a serious problem, and it's not going away on its own. Christian nationalism has money, it has organization, it has political power, it has media platforms, it has decades of infrastructure. But here's what it doesn't have. It doesn't have the truth. It doesn't have history on its side. It doesn't have the Constitution on its side. And it doesn't have Jesus on its side, no matter how loudly it claims otherwise. So what can you actually do? First, educate yourself. Learn the difference between Christianity and Christian nationalism. Understand the history. Know the players and organizations involved. Second, talk about it with your friends, your family, your community. Use the actual term Christian nationalism. Don't let it hide behind euphemisms. Third, show up locally. School board meetings, city council meetings. These are the places where Christian nationalists are making their moves right now. Fourth, support organizations fighting this fight. Americans United for Separation of Church and State, Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty, Freedom from Religion Foundation. These groups are doing the legal and advocacy work. Fifth, vote. Every election, local, state, federal, Christian nationalists vote every time. So must we. And sixth, don't give up. Don't get cynical. Don't let exhaustion win. Christian nationalism offers a vision of America as a place of hierarchy, where some people count more than others, where some beliefs are protected and others are punished, where power flows from religious authority rather than democratic consent. But there's another vision, a better one. An America where religious freedom actually means freedom for all religions and no religion, where people can live according to their own conscience without imposing their beliefs on others through law, where democracy means the people govern, not God through self-appointed interpreters, where out of many, one isn't just an old motto, but a lived reality. That's worth fighting for. Look, I know this has been heavy. If you've made it this far, thank you. This isn't easy stuff to sit with. But here's what I need you to understand. Christian nationalism thrives in darkness. It thrives in fear. It thrives when authority goes unquestioned. It weakens when we talk openly, when we learn honestly, when we refuse to be manipulated by religious language used for political control. Faith should never be forced. Belief should never be legislated. And no one gets to claim God as their personal political mascot. So let's keep telling the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. Because democracy depends on it. Our neighbors depend on it. And honestly, the actual teachings of Jesus, the real ones, about love and mercy and justice, depend on it too. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and keep asking hard questions. This is Gravel and Ink.
A.M. Burr is an American author, publisher, and human rights activist whose work focuses on history, media literacy, disinformation, and systems of power. She's the founder of Gravel and Ink Publishing and the author of The Unpatriotic Truth, The Heretical Truth, and Don't Tell Me It Wasn't About Slavery, with more books forthcoming.